Dangerous Hurricane Beryl is headed for the Yucatan Peninsula. I'm Mike Naso with this 4th of July nighttime update on our very dangerous major hurricane, still a Category 3, capable of extensive damage, headed right for areas of Cozumel and Cancun and Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Central Time. Hurricane Beryl was at 19.6 north, 85.5 west, winds still 115 miles per hour, a very dangerous Category 3 hurricane, moving west at 16, and that should bring it ashore over the next few hours along the Yucatan Peninsula. We have hurricane warnings out for all of those areas, including Tulum and Cancun and Cozumel along the Yucatan Peninsula. As it barrels right in, it is going to cause quite a lot of problems. Here's what we're talking about with a Category 3 hurricane. Now, Beryl had been as high as a Category 5. It moved through the islands as a strong Category 4. We're now a low-end Category 3, but look at a low-end Category 3 is still very extensive damage. So this is still a major hurricane and still a very major threat to land masses that are going to be impacted. As I mentioned, we do have hurricane warnings out from Puerto Costa Maya to Cancun, and that includes the island of Cozumel right in this region here. It is all on the highest level of hurricane warning alert as those winds will move onshore. And the wind has really been tight. This is a very small hurricane, and I do mean small. Hurricane force winds only extending out about 30 miles from the center. So again, it should be a relatively small area, but if you are in that core, you could have maximum sustained winds to Category 3 strength. That is a major hurricane. Notice what a long-tracked Caribbean cruiser this hurricane has been, causing devastation in the Windward Islands, along the south coast of Jamaica, and it kind of brushed the Cayman Islands as it now heads towards landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula. This is a very memorable hurricane, especially for this early in the season. We'll be talking about Beryl for years to come. Here's a radar image out of Pinar del Rio in Cuba, western Cuba, and this is from Brian McNulty's page. He animated it with a lot more images so we could get a good idea of the hurricane. The eye is right in there, not terribly well organized, but again, still that eye wall where those winds in here are upwards of 115 miles per hour headed in the general direction of Cozumel. But again, it could be Tulum, it could be Cancun. It's just too early to know where that little core is going to go. But Beryl is very tiny, and she's been very, very persistent, and that's troubling because it's only the second storm of the year in what is forecast to be a year with at least like 20, 21, 23 named storms. Here's the infrared satellite imagery, and again, we've seen a lot of wind shear impacting Beryl, but the hurricane has held up very well, and it's maintained itself, and it's strengthened. It had been down to a Category 2, and it re-strengthened on the 4th of July up to a Category 3 hurricane, and so while there's a big difference between a 3 and a 5, you'd much rather had this weaken to a Category 1 than come ashore as a Category 3 along the Yucatan Peninsula. Regardless, the impacts are going to be pretty hard-hitting. Where the hurricane is right now with regards to the Yucatan, it's closing in over the next overnight hours. It's going to really be a rough time for those in areas there near Playa del Carmen and Cozumel, maybe even Tulum here seem to be right squarely in the path. If it continues moving straight west, it's going to come inland south of those areas, but you could be on the northern side in the northern eye wall, which would be the worst. For a place like Tulum, it would be the worst if the hurricane came in down here, because then you'd be in the northern eye wall and the right front quadrant with the onshore winds and the storm surge threat. Again, all of these little areas here, Punta Allen and Houston, not that Houston, a different Houston, and then up towards Tulum and areas there along the Yucatan coastline, a lot of resort areas further north. You guys are all squarely in the path of this very dangerous major hurricane. Now, where does it go from here? This is a big question, and we still don't know for sure, but this is the HWRF model as of 18Z. It brings the hurricane inland. It'll weaken. It's going to remain over the Yucatan for probably about 12 to 18 hours, and it'll probably weaken down to a tropical storm, but come back. The HWRF model does have it tugging northwestward and coming ashore in Texas as a potent hurricane, a Category 1 or 2, somewhere there north of Padre Island towards Corpus Christi. Now, that's the HWRF model. These are the Europeans, and what does this show you? This shows you that if it stays weaker, it's probably much further west towards Tampico, Mexico. If it strengthens more, it can move much further to the north towards the mid or upper Texas coast. The writing would seem to be on the wall in that case for northern Mexico or South Texas, where most of the European models go, but that hook towards the north is what's concerning for areas of Texas. Here's the GFS ensembles, much weaker than the European, but still some of them showing a hurricane landfall in the state of Texas. Now, what we're watching with this storm is a trough moving through the central United States that's going to weaken the high pressure that's been steering the hurricane. So you have the clockwise high pressure steering the hurricane, the trough comes through, and that's going to tug our hurricane more towards the northwest. So the question is that into Mexico, northern Mexico and the border, or is that into Texas? We just can't say at this point. Everybody from Tampico to Cameron needs to be watching Hurricane Beryl very, very carefully. Here's the key messages with Hurricane Beryl from the National Hurricane Center. Number 1, hurricane force winds, dangerous storm surge, heavy rainfall forecast to begin in the next few hours across the Yucatan Peninsula within that hurricane warning area. Residents there should shelter in place through the passage of those life-threatening conditions. This is a very dangerous Category 3 hurricane. Number 2, there is an increasing risk of strong winds, storm surge, heavy rainfall in portions of northeastern Mexico and southern Texas late this weekend. Interest in those areas should closely monitor the progress of Beryl and updates to the forecast. Hurricane and tropical storm watches are probably going to be issued on Friday. Number 3, rip currents, very, very dangerous, could cause life-threatening beach conditions beginning late Friday and continuing through the weekend across much of the Gulf Coast, and you'll have those swells propagating. Remember, if you get caught in a rip current that takes you out, let it take you out. Don't try and fight it. Swim up the beach or down the beach, and you can survive that. Don't panic either. There's the information for those who read Spanish. Again, this is a very dangerous hurricane, a Category 3 hurricane closing in on landfall here. There's the island of Cozumel, Playa del Carmen, Cancun, Tulum. You guys are squarely in the path of a small but dangerous Category 3 hurricane, a very rare event, a late June, early July major hurricane, Hurricane Beryl. We've been watching it as it moved through the Windward Islands, impacted the south coast of Jamaica, and tonight, 4th of July into the 5th of July, will be making landfall along the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on dangerous Hurricane Beryl, and I will talk to you next time.